very first movie after he came to America in 1968, Hercules in New York, also called Hercules Goes Bananas, in which Arnold co-stars with a really lame nightclub comic and plays Hercules visiting New York against Zeus's wishes. Arnold's English was so bad that they had to dub his voice. Anyway, it should be fun. Right now, though, we're going to watch Halloween 2, which is a pretty good sequel to the film that started it all, John Carpenter's Halloween. The interesting thing about this film is that it takes place the same day as the original Halloween. The original film ends a little before dawn. This one starts out with the paramedics coming to take Jamie Lee Curtis to the hospital and pick up Michael Myers' body, or they think they're going to pick up Michael Myers' body. And this is also one of the best musical scores that John Carpenter ever wrote. That Halloween theme, that is one of the scariest things. John Carpenter wrote, produced, did the music for this one, but he didn't actually direct it. So I don't want to give it away, so I'll just reel off those drive-in totals and we'll get to it. We have 13 dead bodies, 1 naked breast. I swear we do. Watch for it. Throat slitting, throat stabbing, 1 motor vehicle chase with explosion, claw hammer to the head, 1 strangulation, scalding water to the face, knife to the forehead, needle to the ear, exploding stuntman, 4 stars. Check it out. We'll be here continuing to diddle around like we know what we're talking about. Go. You know what they should have? It's Jason and Freddy and Michael Myers all in the same movie, like a tag team match. You know, Halloween the 13th on Elm Street meets Abbott and Costello, something like that, with Richard Roundtree as the police commissioner.
Back to Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs and Halloween 2 on TNT.
Ooh, burned to a crispy critter. I should thank the TNT censors for leaving in the burned to a crisp car crash explosion scene. And I guess you probably figured out that was not Michael Myers, because if it was Michael Myers, we have no movie. Anyway, this movie got savaged by the critics. Every critic except Janet Maslin of the New York Times. She kind of liked it, which is weird because she used to hate horror films. Anyway, they said it was too much like the first movie. But I thought the interesting thing about it is that it starts 5 minutes after the first movie ends. Normally with a sequel, they put up some lame subtitle that says 5 years later. And then we see some story about the sister of the heroine. But here we have Donald Pleasance roaming around screaming, "But I shot him 6 times! I shot him 6 times!" It's Donald who makes these movies work. I think he'll always be best remembered for this role, even though he did everything in his career. He was the Nazi SS chief in The Eagle Has Landed. Remember that? He was the president in Escape from New York. He was the villain in the great James Bond movie, You Only Live Twice. He was in a lot of great B movies like The Fiendish Ghouls and The Hands of Orlac and Circus of Horrors, Raw Meat. He was in The Great Escape. But Donald's main thing was the British stage, especially the plays of Harold Pinter. He did that play, The Caretaker. His whole life he did that play. Anyway, Donald was shot down over Germany in World War II, and he spent most of the war in a prisoner of war camp. So he was one of those guys who, when he got back home to England, he wanted to work like hell. He was just so happy to be alive. And so his whole career, he took every dang job that came his way. He was probably in 100 films. And then finally, 2 years ago, he did die shortly after completing his final film, Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. He might have starred in Look Back in Anger and The Great Escape and all those great films, but we'll always remember him as Dr. Loomis. Okay, roll it. Coming up is the moment we all wait for when Dr. Loomis makes his pure evil speech. I love that when he says, "It's pure evil." You want to win a Monstervision t-shirt? Only one way to do it. You got to try your luck in the Monster Caption Contest. All you have to do is make the 6-headed jury laugh. The funniest one-liner gets a prize. And I'm sorry, the t-shirts only come in extra large because all our contestants are fat. I mean, all our contestants are big Monster fans.
Play the Monster Caption Contest and win a free t-shirt at tnt.turner.com/Monstervision. Back to Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs and Halloween 2 on TNT.
Did you notice how they edited that cussing scene? Jimmy says, every other word you say is either hell or damn.
Every other word you say is either hell or damn.
Why do I think there's an extra hell in there? And then Brad says, well, sorry, I guess I just up all the time.
Sorry. I guess I just up all the time.
Why didn't they make him say, sorry, I guess I just hell up all the time? Or sorry, I guess I just damn up all the time? See, I've figured it out. The TNT censors don't like cuss words that can be used as verbs, which means you can never show a good Jack Nicholson or Jack Warden movie on TV, because they are the experts in the art of transitive verb declarative sentences, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. Anyway, the guy playing Brad is Leo Rossi, who would later become well known for the excellent Relentless series. You guys seen those movies, Relentless? I think there's 4 of them. And the actress playing Karen is Pamela Susan Shoop, daughter of the actress Julie Bishop. 2 generations of fine B-movie filmmaking, but who gives a hell, right? Let's get back to the movie. See, I know how to do this without ing up. Great scene coming up later where Brad and Karen damn their brains out. If you got something to say about tonight's movie or me or the mail girl or anything else that's on your mind, then I invite you to speak your mind in Joe Bob's Rec Room. I got spies that tell me everything happens in there, and sometimes I drop in just to see how many people enjoy wasting a perfectly good Saturday night by watching this show. You can't get there from here, but you can get there at tnt.turner.com/monstervision.
Come talk monsters in Joe Bob's Rec Room at tnt.turner.com/monstervision. Back to Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs and Halloween 2 on TNT.
The old claw hammer to the head trick, illustrating one of the 10 first principles of horror, namely rule number 8, if you're fat, you must die. It's an ironclad rule in a horror flick. John Carpenter didn't really want to make this movie, and he didn't direct it. The producers kind of forced him to make it, and then at the last minute he was brought in to fix it, because they apparently didn't like the version that Rick Rosenthal, the director, turned in. Now, Rick Rosenthal's an interesting guy. He's one of these artistes. You know, in college he majored in economics and government, but then he went traveling around Italy, and he had this religious experience while watching shipbuilders in Via Reggio. And he said, that's what I must do. I must fashion metal with my hands like the shipbuilders. So he became a metal sculptor, and he went to Harvard to sculpt metal and paint. And then in 1973, he turned in his thesis at Harvard on videotape. He was the first guy at Harvard ever allowed to do a videotape thesis. And so he thinks, great, videotape thesis, I'm a filmmaker, that's what I'll do. So he makes documentaries for New Hampshire Public TV, only while he was working on his biggest documentary, he was talking to this 70-year-old abstract expressionist painter named Maud Morgan, who had known Hemingway in Paris in the 20s, and she started telling him very personal things about herself, so Rick turned off the camera, because he thought, that's too personal. I'm invading this woman's privacy. Well, that should have been a clue, Rick. But no, he continued on to the American Film Institute's Center for Advanced Film Studies, and he made a short film called Moonface that nobody understood. Then he made a 30-minute psycho killer flick called The Toyer, and John Carpenter's agent saw it and talked to him, and Rick told the agent how he wanted to work with light and form. He wanted to make movies in the manner of pre-von Sternberg German expressionism. So the agent says, you want to direct Halloween 2? And Rick goes, perfect! So while you're watching it, you'll notice there's a lot of stuff in hallways. The guy loves hallways and windows and shafts of light and people running up and down corridors at oblique angles. And now you know why he did it that way. Okay, roll it. Pre-von Sternberg German expressionism in a Halloween movie. You know, there are some things that are more scary than Michael Myers.
Back to Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs and Halloween 2 on TNT.
there you have it. Horror film rule number 6. Whoever has sex must die. And that was the stunt coordinator, Dick Warlock, playing Michael Myers in that scene. In the credits, they just call him The Shape. You know why they had to make Halloween 2? The original one came out in 1978. It was originally called The Babysitter Murders, but at the last minute they changed the name to Halloween, and it only cost $300,000 to make, but it grossed $60 million at the box office. So, of course, the producers wanted a sequel. But John Carpenter and his producer, Deborah Hill, didn't want to do any sequels. They wanted to move on to other types of movies. So in 1979 and 1980, they just re-released Halloween every October, and people loved it. But in the summer of 1980, Friday the 13th came out, and I think the producers got really upset because that thing made so much money they thought that should have been us. It was a worse movie, but just as successful. So they talked John Carpenter into it. And every sequel they made, they said, okay, that's it, this is the last one. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, is the worst one. We've shown that on the show. That came out in 1983, but with no Jamie Lee Curtis, no Donald Pleasance, no Michael Myers. They went totally away from the storyline, and the audiences hated it. They hated it so much that there were no more Halloween movies until 1988, when they did Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. They'd finally figured it out with that title, right? Then the next year they made Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, and in 1995 they made Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. For some reason, they did not call it Halloween 6. And you know why? Because no director would take the job. Because you go, hey, Steve, what you working on? You go, Halloween 6. I mean, it's humiliating, you know? But if you can say, oh, it's a little suspense thriller called The Curse of Michael Myers. Ah, interesting. See, people are weird. Okay, roll the flick. All right, most of you already know that Monstervision is on every Saturday night on TNT, but some of you don't know that you can get a preview of this week's Monstervision right now. If you check out the Monstervision website, you can find out about this week's creature feature, plus you read some of my most personal fan mail. You can play the monster caption contest. Won't that be fun? Win a t-shirt. Sneak a peek at this week's Monstervision Playmate. To get there, point your browser to tnt.turner.com/monstervision. And as for those of you who want to voice your opinions or suggestions or complaints or gripe at us, here's the mailing address you need. Monstervision at 1010 Techwood Drive, Atlanta, Georgia, 30318. But if you're one of those cyber people who love to send email all the time, you got a choice of 2 addresses for me. Why do we have 2 addresses? One is monstervision@turner.com, and the other is joebob@turner.com. I don't know. Don't make me have to tell you all this again because it was too confusing to remember all the first time.
Visit the Monstervision website at tnt.turner.com/Monstervision. Back to Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs and Halloween 2 on TNT.
That's the Baroness Hayden Guest, limping down the hallway, cowering in her hospital gown, whimpering as she falls asleep on the floor. Did you know that's what you have to call Jamie Lee Curtis now? The Baroness Hayden Guest. It's true. She's married to Christopher Guest, right? The great comedian and writer from Spinal Tap. So Christopher's dad died last year, and this summer Christopher took his seat in the House of Lords as the 5th Baron Hayden Guest, and he has to wear the wig and everything. Anyway, Halloween 2 was made in 1981, long before Jamie Lee was a blue blood, and it was her 6th horror film in a row. Her very first job was in the TV series Operation Petticoat when she was 19 years old, which was ironic because her father, Tony Curtis, had starred in the movie Operation Petticoat. And then her second job was as the screaming heroine in Halloween, which was also ironic because her mom, Janet Leigh, was famous as the screaming heroine in Psycho. Anyway, so then she made The Fog and Prom Night and Terror Train and Road Games, and about this same time she starred in the TV movie Death of a Centerfold as the murdered Playboy playmate Dorothy Stratton. And Jamie and Linda Blair were the 2 queens of horror for quite a few years there in the late 70s, early 80s. And also Jamie Lee Curtis's co-star and love interest in this movie, Lance Guest, as Jimmy. He also went on to starring roles in The Last Starfighter and, of course, in the immortal Jaws 4. Okay, back to Halloween 2, starring Donald Pleasance and the Baroness Hayden Guest. Jaws 4 is the one where Michael Caine goes on vacation in the Bahamas, so the shark follows his airplane from Massachusetts to the Bahamas so he can eat him down there. The shark follows the whole family wherever they go on vacation. It's a stalking shark.
Back to Monstervision host Joe Bob Briggs and Halloween 2 on TNT.
Dr. Loomis kicks Heine. All right, we're heading into the conclusion of Halloween 2, but I want to mention that this movie became famous in a kind of bad way because shortly after it came out, this lunatic named Richard Delmer Boyer murdered an elderly couple in Fullerton, California, and the reason he gave was that he was on drugs, and the drugs caused him to flash back to a scene he saw in Halloween 2, and so he acted out the scene. So his defense was, yes, I killed him, I didn't mean to do it, but I did it. So the jury listened to this whole story and sentenced him to death. But it became known in Fullerton as the Halloween 2 murders. And the only scene I can imagine he's talking about is that scene at the very beginning of the movie where Michael Myers goes into the house and gets the butcher knife and scares the old lady. Anyhow, let's go. Oh, yeah, one more thing. At the very end of the movie, in the final scene, there are some TV reporters interviewing people. One of the reporters is a famous movie star today. See if you can find him. Got to be really quick. He's in the movie for about 2 seconds. Now you've got to watch to the end, right? Okay, roll it. You know who John Carpenter was married to when they made this movie? Adrienne Barbeau. Remember her? He used her in The Fog, and Wes Craven used to use her in Swamp Thing. Healthy girl. I love that Mr. Sandman music at the end. Supposedly, John Carpenter had to be brought in to film a few scenes at the end of shooting because the producers didn't like what Rick Rosenthal did with the picture, but I think it's just a fine picture. I kind of like it. Oh, and the movie star seen in the final scene there is Dana Carvey, listed in the credits as reporter's assistant. I would imagine that was Dana's film debut. Okie dokie, remember next week we have the big Schwarzenegger double feature, Conan the Destroyer, followed by Hercules in New York, the first movie he ever made. If you hadn't seen this, you've got to watch it. It's hysterical. And I guess that's it for me for tonight. Did you guys hear the one about the 3 friars who decided to leave their monastery and start a business together? Well, they traveled around until they found this town that they liked, and they opened up a plant and flower shop. So one day this woman was shopping at the friar's store, and while she was strolling down the aisle with her toddler, this large plant reached out, grabbed her child, and ate it. The woman was very upset, but the friars refused to believe that one of their plants could have done such a thing. But the woman told all of her friends, and soon everybody in town was in an uproar, and they decided to kick the friars out of town. Every person in the town, except for one guy named Hugh, gathered outside the friar's shop. They were shouting, waving sticks, demanding that they leave, but the friars held their ground, and the townspeople finally gave up and went home. Okay, so a couple weeks later, another woman is walking through the friar's shop looking at plants with her baby. Plant grabs her child and eats it. She runs through the streets screaming, a plant swallowed her baby, a plant swallowed her baby. Townspeople are outraged, and again they all gather out in front of the shop, except for Hugh, and they demand that the friars leave town at once, but the friars refuse, and the people eventually go home. So upon hearing of these events, this guy Hugh decides to check out the situation for himself, and he takes his child into the floral shop, and he holds on to the child very tightly, but it's no use because a large ficus tree wrestles the child from his arms and eats it. Hugh marches up to the friars and he says quietly, "Get out of town now." And the friars immediately pack up all their belongings and they flee from the town that very day, never to be heard from again. And the moral of the story is, only Hugh can prevent florist friars. Oh. Joe Bob Briggs reminding you that the drive-in will never die. I'm getting out of here.